Hello. We are here to talk about ways that we can build balance for everybody in the context of our yoga classes. This is Comfort Zone Yoga, Comfort Zone Conversations. Comfort Zone Yoga is a virtual studio focused on yoga teacher development. And we have monthly free calls like this, where I, Sage Rountree, present on a topic that I find personally interesting and exciting. Often these are keyed to something that is going on. Like at the end of the year, we have a reflection call. At the start of the year, we have a preview call. And I recently polled now there are over 2,500 yoga teachers at Comfort Zone. And I polled them and asked what they were interested in. And balance was one of the very high level topics that folks were super interested in. Last month, we talked about theming. That was the number one. And next month, we'll talk about restorative, which is the number three. But we are on number two, which is perfect because balance is often about taking two things and finding the appropriate relationship between them. Relationship is my favorite definition of yoga. In fact, if we want to get a little contextual, philosophical here, when we're thinking about balance, we can come back to the concept of the yoke, Y-O-K-E, yug, the root word for the word yoga. And what a yoke does is create a harness of two potentially opposing forces, two oxen that, left to their own devices, are going to want to wander off in their own directions. But it brings those two opposing forces into a harmony where they can work together in relationship to achieve things that they may not even get on their own. So the sum is greater than the parts. We have about an hour together to talk about ways that we can serve our students with balance. And if you need to tip off early, please know this will go up on my YouTube channel on Saturday, so you will get a link to it. Okay, I am Sage Rountree. That is my real name. That's not just my yoga teacher name. I am the founder of Comfort Zone Yoga, and I direct a 200-hour yoga teacher training here, as well as a 300/500. You may know the math is that 200 plus 300 equals 500. And I also offer a lot of continuing education. My yoga teaching specialty is yoga for athletes. And the class that I just ended teaching after almost 23 years was called Yoga for Athletic Balance for the last maybe 8 years or so. Before that, it was just yoga for athletes, but it got even more specific. I believe balance is the very point of the yoga practice on every level. I believe that when we're thinking about yoga asana, that teaching our students balance is probably the best way, that we can serve the broadest ability ability, maybe is not the word I want to do, the broadest span of students who might come to us. And then also, well, kind of on the topic of ability, it's how we can include almost everybody in a single class by giving them options as to how their bodies express each individual balanced pose. So that's where we're going over the course of this next 50-some minutes. Let's talk first about why balance matters so very much. It has multiple prongs. It matters physically, of course, because the ability to balance in space is how we prevent ourselves from injury. Is how we prevent ourselves from falling. What I used to say at the start of my Yoga for Athletic Balance class was a whole spiel that went a little bit like this. Balance is the key to preventing injury. Our balance of the body in space is how we prevent ourselves from the acute injuries that come when we fall. Balance within the body itself, top to bottom, front to back, and left to right, that is how we prevent ourselves from accruing chronic injuries, the overuse injuries, all the itises that the folks who come to Yoga for Athletes class would be familiar with: plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, patellar tendonitis, hip bursitis, to work from the ground up. All of these are overuse injuries that come from some kind of imbalance within the body, or an imbalance between the amount of work that the athlete is trying to accomplish and the amount of rest that they are able to take to let their bodies absorb and find that balance that we could call physiologically homeostasis or adaptation. So that was the spiel I would give about physical balance being important for injury prevention. But we also know that the number one predictor of a fall is a future fall. So we are trying to start this cascade from even beginning. Also, what we do in balance poses in the context of a yoga asana class can be very specifically functional and mimic what we do in real life. I have a whole sequence that I teach that is how you could go out and stand on your driveway with your running shoes and your socks and work balance while putting first your socks and then your shoes on. I'm going to show you a few moves a little bit later, and I know I will have forgotten by that, but hit me up, drop me a message in Comfort Zone, and I will see if I can find an old video I did demonstrating that or talk you through that one. It's a really great example of how we can show our students in the context of a yoga studio, of a yoga classroom, on the mat, how the things that they're doing with their bodies have direct applicability to their real life. Yoga is working balance poses in yoga is also really great at developing our awareness of where our bodies are in space. And that's true of any of the asanas. But I think that the gold standard here is teaching balance poses to our students is the fast track to building their sense of proprioception and their body awareness. And this is important, of course, for seniors, but it also is very important for younger students as well, because they're growing and their bodies are changing. And gosh, I remember for over a decade, I taught private yoga to a basketball coach here in Central North Carolina, in Chapel Hill, Coach Roy Williams. And he once told me that one of his basketball players grew over 12 inches in 1 year. Can you imagine in high school having such a change to your perception of where your body is in space? It's absolutely mind-blowing. Just to even to think about the spatial awareness that's required if you have suddenly shot up to that degree, let alone the tension that it's putting on your bones and your muscles because they grow at different rates. Pretty wild. So that's the physical reason balance matters. But balance is also a really great way to fast track the intrapersonal benefits of yoga, the sense of interoception, the sense of awareness of your mind, of the patterns, the samskaras that your brain has put down over the years. You get to notice how you talk to yourself when you fall out of a pose. You have to be in the moment because if you let your attention wander in a balanced pose, you're probably going to drop out of it. So balance is another way to bring the benefits of yoga beyond just the physical, but toward the mental and psycho-emotional to our students. This phrase you see in the middle of the slide on screen, I think is a really important one when we're thinking about balance. Self-efficacy. It's a belief in our ability to do things. I love self-efficacy as like the result of us as teachers being movement optimists and trusting our students to make smart choices and to be able to try things with their bodies, maybe to fail, and then to be resilient and come back and try it again. In this way, it is a workout for the nervous system, but it also is quite physically a workout for the nervous system because you're always receiving information about where your body is in space via your nerves and your proprioceptors. Then there's this philosophical element to balance, and we'll get to this in some of the latter slides here. It is a lifelong practice of finding the yoke, the union between these two apparent opposing forces. It is in that way a doorway into the rest of yoga, into yoga philosophy, as I will expound when we get to that portion of today's presentation. And it's something that works both immediately in the context of a yoga class or yoga practice on the mat, and then also globally as we move off the mat and into the world. So teaching balance is where it's at, as I hope I have convinced you here. We are giving students tools for life when we teach them balance. There are several systems at play in balance, as I have alluded to. It is the real-time integration of these legs of the stool that lets us suspend our bodies in space, that keeps us in this relationship to gravity that we want to be in, often perpendicular relationship to gravity here. Standing on one leg, standing on two legs, we'll explore the variety of balance poses available to us. One of the important systems, and you know this if you have ever suffered from vertigo, is the vestibular system, the rocks in your head, the little crystals in your inner ear. And they help us with awareness of where our bodies are in space. So in balance poses, we get to challenge the vestibular system. We also challenge the proprioceptive system The nerves and the proprioceptive cells that help us know, give us little like neuron sensors to tell us where we are in space and that let us make those micro adjustments, the wobbles that are the hallmark of a developing balance practice, the wobbles that we are looking for from our students, because they're where we learn where our edges are and where we improve our balance and where we grow. And you know this as yogis, the visual system has a very strong role to play in balance in space. If you've ever worked to anchor your drishti, set your gaze on a non-moving object while you are practicing a balance pose, you know that the visual system is giving us a whole lot of information as well about where we are in space. And that's why one of the easier progressions, well, it's not easy, but it's an easy one to apply to any pose. One of the ways to progress any balance pose is to close one eye or to slowly blink both eyes, or even to try the shape with your eyes completely closed. There's always a next level. And so the visual system is an important part here. If you change any one thing, if you close one eye, the experience is going to change. The load is going to shift among these various systems. And that's how we are always finding an appropriate edge to challenge ourselves to grow. I know it's ironic to have a yoga studio called Comfort Zone Yoga, because the comfort zone is not the growth zone. We have to go into the growth zone in order to adapt and grow stronger. But then we need to also come back to our comfort zone. And the way we can play with balance poses in the context of a yoga class is giving us a real-time journey in and out of the comfort zone into the growth zone and back again. Okay. Now, even if you think, oh, I'm unique as a yoga teacher because I'm bad at balancing. Really, those of us who are teaching yoga, those of us who are on this call, are probably actually pretty good at balance, and we self-select. Yoga teachers themselves are, of course, among the more good at balancing spectrum of the population, are among the more flexible and mobile and strong and stable spectrum of the population. And for us, even if you think you have had to struggle to learn to balance, you probably haven't had to struggle as much as many of the students in the room will have. You may have heard me say in other contexts that your backstory is not baggage. Your backstory is your curriculum. So if you really have had to struggle, if you suffered from vertigo, if you have something going on with your brain that makes balance a little bit harder, that's actually going to be really great at helping you help other people who have similar issues learn how to balance. What we as yoga teachers probably struggle with here is that we've got some blind spots around how we can help students who are living in a variety of different body shapes and ages and life experiences, abilities, disabilities, that we may not quite have the language for helping them balance. Because I know you've probably been to many yoga classes, and you probably led many yoga classes where you just tell people, now stay with your breath and balance is going to come, or find your drishti and hold still. That's like telling people to relax, right? So those kind of cues are not going to give us the arrows that are really going to shoot to the heart of the balance poses for our students. We're going to look as we come into movement, as I come into movement, and you will be invited to join me, at some ways that we could cue beyond just the like, take tree pose and don't move. We'll practice static and dynamic balance and some interesting approaches into balance poses. So let's remember that we are self-selected as yoga teachers among the more capable of balancing, even if you feel like you're not. I bet you are. And we need to meet our students where they are, not just come from our own privilege of being pretty good at balancing. The reframe, of course, for students that I've already alluded to here is that wobbling is the practice. We find that growth edge by going into the wobble. If it were easy, then it isn't a challenge. And like the fridge magnet says, no challenge, no change. So we are not here to quell the wobble. We are here to celebrate the wobble that happens. And I know when I begin to demo for you in a moment, I'm going to wobble just plenty for you. So that's a great way actually to model for your students. Let them see you fall out of a shape, even if you have to fake it. Let them see you step down and come back up. Another system that is at play in balance that didn't make it to the earlier slide is this system, the word self-efficacy kind of points to it, the system of psychology and of fear. Ironically, the more worried you are about achieving a balance pose, the harder it's going to be to achieve it. That's the paradox at the heart. So we want to instill some confidence in our students that whatever expression they have of balance pose is fine. If they're finding just that very light growth edge, they are doing it correctly. They're doing it right. And that's how they are training their nervous systems, that it is an okay place to be. They're on the edge of losing balance. I also advocate for something that I call the sense of humor warm up, getting situated pretty early on in your class sequence. I generally do this as the transition point between the warm up that I teach down on the mat and the standing sequence in a class that's going to have standing in it. I make the transition itself into something kind of silly. I'll show you an example or two when I come onto my mat in just a moment. This lets everybody fail on purpose and laugh at it. So the sense of humor warm-up could be as simple as, let's get people to stand up from the ground, maybe without using their hands, and see if they can find a funky, fresh way to do it. I'll show you some examples in a second. When you can kind of pop the balloon and relieve a little bit of the pressure and the impetus to get it right. This is a métier in my Yoga for Athletes class. Of course, I'm like teaching peak performers, like people very interested in getting things right, are hyper type A. For those folks, if you can lighten the mood early on in that transition up to standing, the subsequent balance poses are going to be so much easier because you can remind them like, hey, it's okay to fall. We all fell when we were trying to come up from the floor a moment ago. We also want to find the growth edge by bringing people slowly away from the wall. You may have experienced this if you've ever learned to do a handstand. The quicker you can get yourself away from the wall, the stronger you're going to be. And if you always only practice at the wall, then that's it, right? No challenge, no change. Then you're always going to expect and need the wall. And your handstand is going to start to look like a banana because your feet just get pulled to the wall like magnets because they get used to it being there. So always looking for a modification that is bringing us right to the next comfortable step away from the wall. In half moon, this might mean starting students with their whole back body at the wall, and depending on your population, that may actually be the endpoint for you as well, but then turning them away from the wall so that they just have the sole of their foot stamped to the wall as their point of contact, or they lean out another inch or two so that just the ball of the foot is in contact with the wall. And eventually we're trying to get them to move to the stage where they could do this wall free. A tree pose, we could go a little bit lower, kickstand calf, a fingertip to the wall, a fingertip to a chair. Even just knowing the chair is there or the wall is there will sometimes have a placebo effect, but it can also have that magnet effect, like I talked about with handstand. It can kind of draw you toward it. So sometimes being out away from items where you might grab on is actually the answer. And sometimes having the chair at hand is actually the answer. I trust you to know your student population best. Clearly, if you're teaching chair yoga to seniors, you want to have them at the chair and maybe even have the chair at the wall. Some other examples here, warrior 3, maybe with your blocks under your hands or hand to the wall, or then eventually coming into it dynamically from a warrior 1. You also can do some balance challenge on the floor. There's a whole host of things you can do, like bird dog, or even just shifting your weight from a tabletop position, coming onto your forearms is going to change the relationship to gravity. Different angles, different lever length is going to disrupt the patterns that the body wants always to default to. And so those are some ways that you can pull folks away from the wall, but still have plenty of support by practicing versions of balance poses down on the floor. And sometimes, y'all, those are the spicier ones Think about doing half moon on your knee instead of on your foot. You're losing access to all the micro corrections that your foot would want to make down on the floor. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of demo. If you are in a situation where you can practice along with me, I invite you to, and then you can come to the chat and tell me how it's going. I want to show you a few things. I'm actually going to stop the screen share for now, and we'll come back to that so that you can see me bigger. And I'm going to change my camera to the wider view. Okay, I promised that I would talk about the sense of humor warm up coming up from the floor. And this might be quite humorous because I will admit I have been at home working all day and I haven't really warmed up to this. So if this becomes a little bit of a comedy show, you're welcome. I am here to be your clown. So if you've got students coming up from the ground, one thing that I really like to do is to have them use a block. You could also use a bolster or you could stack blocks for this. And I think I'll give you kind of a profile view here so you get a sense of where I'm going from this. Here's the rule. It's to say something like, come up to standing from the ground. We're going to try it without letting our hands touch the ground. We can come from cross-legged, reach your hands forward. You can almost imagine that you were pulling on somebody because that's another great way that we could teach this exercise. We'd lean back, we'd press down, and we'd lift up. And I often don't tell them which ankle to have in front. In fact, if we were coming up from a seated warm-up, we could keep the legs just as is. Then you'll want to come down super carefully, be aware of where your support is, change the cross of your legs. Because you were probably in your default, this is the non-default, and it often feels a little bit harder. That said, sometimes the second side is always better because your brain has begun to understand what you're asking from it. A little lean back gives you a tiny bit of momentum, and then we'll roll the weight from the pinky toes to the big toe sides of the feet there. So those would be two ways that you could play with bringing your students up to standing in that sense of humor warm up. And if this isn't funny yet, then there's always a next level, right? The next level would be to try to come up without having the legs crossed. So the cross gives us a slightly different contact point. And we've got this action of rolling from the pinky toes to the balls of the feet to come up to standing. This one might feel a little bit harder. Don't do this if your knees are not feeling great. It's an inhale to lean back and exhale to rock forward and press down. And if that goes really well, you can always find a next level. I flip the block down and we'll see. I believe in myself. It's called self-efficacy, people. Inhale, lean back. Exhale, press down to rise up. Then again, there is always a next level. I will try this. Here is your clown show. 3 ways down from the floor in my default cross of my legs. Okay, that went well. Disco move. Bring me back down. I'm in the non-default cross of the legs. Inhale, lean back. Exhale, press down, come up. Cool. What if I tried this from here? There have been times in my life when I have been able to do this. I don't think today is going to be one of them. It's an inhale to lean back and an exhale. Yeah, it's not happening. So one time I was teaching a 5-day workshop at Kripalu in Western Massachusetts, the yoga center, and we did this move early on, I think on the first day of the 5. And my students, who were all there to learn to teach yoga to athletes, got really frustrated. They're like, why is this so hard? Why can't I stand up? And I said, why don't we practice this every session? And every session over the course of the week, we practiced it from props, taking the props away, getting them a little bit lower. You could also do that from a blanket and take off a layer of blanket every time. By the end of the week, everybody in the room could do it. And it wasn't that their muscles had adapted over the course of 5 days. It's that their brains figured out which nerves to fire to activate the muscles and to make that happen. The nervous system is really resilient and adaptable, and it catches on pretty quickly. So this is something that I think you could begin to deploy in your classes, and your students will very quickly feel like, hey, I got it. It's better than it was last week, which is another reason to repeat your sequence over time so that they can really learn how resilient they are, how adaptable they are, how capable their bodies are. Let me show you another thing in maybe a full side view here, because you can do balance poses without them being asymmetrical. You can do symmetrical balance poses on 2 legs at a time. Here's a sequence you will find in The Art of Yoga Sequencing and in my book, Everyday Yoga, which is a red cover book full of yoga sequences. So if we think about lifting the arms, we notice that often lifting the arms wants to make us a little back bend. We see if we can do a slight standing crunch and come more into a mountain pose with the arms lifted. Then we could try softening the knees and lifting the heels, maybe just enough to slide a piece of paper underneath, maybe to like a sensible 1-inch heel like you would wear to church, or maybe a Saturday night stiletto come up. This is a lot of work for the lower legs. I'm coming back down and I'm going to come up again. The drop out of this shape is not going to be a very big one, right? It's subtle. So your students get the chance to experiment with their edges to find that growth zone without a dramatic fall out of a crow pose or a warrior 3, not a like arm windmilling action. This is a great 2-leg balance pose to play with. You could even play with bringing the parts of your legs together that would touch, or with going to external rotation, pizza slice between my feet here, lifting and lowering, or starting to widen the stance, maybe heels to shoulder distance apart. Gets a little bit easier for me when I go wide, or maybe even wider still. Yeah, still pretty good. Narrower is tougher for me. Feet parallel is tougher for me than the turnout. So there's a 2-leg balance pose that you can practice. And you could layer onto that with a bend in the knees. This bend in the knees could absolutely happen with the heels down on the floor. Or you could bring this down lower, or you could bring this down lower, or you could bring this down lower, 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 lower. Now I'm in a squat. Another way to practice balance is lowering down to the floor. And then we've already established that I can't get back up, but you could go into the rolling like a ball series. A little bit of momentum would bring me up and over into this, and I can experiment with coming all the way back up. So there's always a question of finding the appropriate edge. I want to show you one more thing, and that is a dynamic entry into balance poses. This is something that I teach a lot, and for those of you, I know several of you here are in Mastering the Art of Yoga Sequencing, a mentorship membership, half of my 300-hour yoga teacher training, and then many others here are in the prep station, which is my lesson planning membership. There are a lot of videos in the prep station that show this dynamic approach into balance poses. I've got one that's a crane, got a whole sequence called 1,000 cranes, do a lot of dynamic work. Here's a simple one that also lives in there. It's to move dynamically into a tree pose or a dancer pose. So that would look like maybe several pulses up to this crane. You can do whatever you want with your arms in this. And then maybe several pulses into horizontal abduction. Then maybe several short hamstring curls to tap the foot against the leg. And finally, to arrive in a tree pose, I've got my foot against my knee, nothing bad is happening. It feels perfectly fine for me. So that would be a dynamic approach into a tree pose. Or you could do a dynamic approach into a dancer pose. I'm going to internally rotate my leg, and I can catch my foot because it's lifted up to my hand. And now I can work my way into dancer. Or I could come around, internally rotate, tap. Look at this. I'm in eagle pose, but with a reverse, with the back leg in back, or I could tap in front. So those approaches are really great. I did refer to the warrior 1 to warrior 3 tip earlier. So that's an example of where you could have students just do it kind of casually with their arms low and rocking forward and back. Or you can make it grander, come in and hold. I like to think about it as driving by the pose before you commit to going into the party. So it's like, is this a party yet? Do I want to go in there? And when we pulse like that, we are training our nervous systems to know exactly where we are in space and how we can then arrive at a place where we can stay. Back on this view. Okay, I'm catching my breath after that modeling. I'm going to bring the screen share back on and we'll move on. Just a word to anybody who has come in and not found, there are slides for you in the chat. It's the pinned post at the top of the chat. So those are some things that I talked about, the rolling like a ball into squat. If you took any movement, come through the chat and let me know what felt interesting to you. Let's get back into the content here, sequencing balance in ways so that everybody in your class can feel successful. You just saw me demonstrate doing a two-legged balance first before a single leg balance. And I said that could be legs very close, that could be legs very wide. You can also do a two-legged asymmetrical balance with a tip from side to side. That's something that I teach almost as I'm a little teapot in a star pose sequence. You can also take one featured balance pose that you're going to teach over the course of the class and do it multiple times. I'm envisioning a spiral where it just keeps getting another layer added onto it. So you could imagine with a tree pose, that could be like first we're all doing kickstand with our arms out to the side. And then we're seeing if we want to take the foot up a little bit higher and the arms go up higher. And then we're seeing if we want to take the foot up without connecting the foot to the leg. It's a lot harder when you don't connect your foot to your leg. And maybe we bring the arms up and the gaze up. And now we started to disrupt the information we're getting from the visual system. So there's always going to be a next level. Some other ways you can level up that we'll see in a later slide include not just disrupting the gaze, but destabilizing the surface. So you could take your students' feet onto blocks. Just that elevation of 4 inches or so is like, whoa, this feels a little bit different up here. You could have them stand on blankets or triple fold their mat to give a squishier surface or come up onto a bolster. Conversely, if you want to make things sweeter for your students, and this is a way to include everyone in class, ask them to step off of their mats onto the harder floor, and it's less work for their feet, for all those little joints in their feet to balance. So same recipe, one variable changed. That spiral would be those levels up in tree pose. And there's always, always a next level. If you are in tree pose with your foot not touching your standing leg, your arms up, your face up, your eyes closed, could you then lift your heel of your standing foot? And here's the yoga teacher joke. Could you then lift the entirety of your standing foot up off the floor? It's one of the CDs that the latter books of the Yoga Sutras mention. Like, oh yeah, you can levitate, you can astrally project. I haven't gotten there yet in my yoga practice, but that's another way to keep the mood light in your balance classroom, is to get your students laughing about how there's always going to be a next level. I like to slot balance in across the entire sequence, maybe 1 or 2 little moves in the warm-up that challenge our balance. And of course, the transition from the floor up to standing is another way to do that. Lots of balance poses over the course of my standing sequence, and then more balance work when we come back down to the mat. So it's not like, oh, this always happens at half past the hour and it is the apex of my entire class plan. Instead, I like to sprinkle it throughout the class. It puts less weight on getting it right any one time because there will always be another opportunity to find your unique edge, to find that challenge to your balance. If you have been in my world for a little while, if you've read my book, The Art of Yoga Sequencing, or watched some of my YouTube videos, you may know that I use a framework called 642 in order to ensure that the sequences that I write and then the sequences that I put together into a fuller class plan are balanced. Let me break that down for you in 30 seconds. The 6 is the 6 moves of the spine in the 3 planes of motion. So forward and back in the sagittal plane, spinal flexion, spinal extension. Side to side in the frontal plane, so that is lateral flexion of the spine, and then around and round in the transverse plane is twisting your spine. And when I teach a class that's focused on balance, I try to have moves that take the spine in all of those directions. So if you think about dancer, tree, pigeon, eagle, which is one of the sequences I have in my movement library in the prep station and in that one is bringing us forward and back, dancer pose, working in the sagittal plane with some extension. Then tree pose, got some movement in the frontal plane. Often I teach tree pose with the side bend, toward the bent leg side. So there we've got the movement in the frontal plane. We've also got the inner and outer lines of the legs. That's what the 4 is. The 4 is front and back line of the legs, inner and outer lines of the legs. And of course, the 2 is core stabilization and core articulation. And we stabilize once we get there, but we articulate to get our way into it. So just dancer and tree alone are covering the 6, some of the 6 and some of the 4. And then if we put in like a pigeon pose, standing pigeon pose with a twist, now we've gotten all of the 6. So that is the lens I use to make sure that the balance poses that I put together work well in harmony as a complete diet, as it were. As they're ticking all the macronutrient boxes of motion. The balance practice is one where it's not just like, oh, and now comes the point where we work balance, where the balance is seamlessly woven entirely through the whole arc of the class, not just up to the peak, but throughout the entire class. And I think this is the best way to include almost everyone in class to create a really all levels practice. Because you might find people at all of these different points in life and with very different bodies in front of you. The pictures that we have here are 2 of the models in the art of yoga sequencing. Different body types, different practice histories, and they're both able to do a pose there that feels like an arrow lunge, that feels like a 2-leg balance pose, a 2-leg asymmetrical balance pose. For your older students, a chair pose with hands on thighs would be one example of ways that you could sweeten the chair pose, or chair pose even in the chair or hovering just above the chair. Another sweet thing that you can do if your group allows and consents to it, and this is nice for connection, which can be a really important part of health for aging adults, is having that sense of interpersonal connection with others, is to do some tandem standing. Even just standing back to back with another classmate can work balance. And we got all kinds of great yoga philosophy lessons that we could add there too. Movement, not even committing to a balance pose, but intentionally playing with walking on the heels, walking on the toes, walking from the heels to the toes. That would be an example of introducing some dynamic balance challenge to your classes for older folks. And then, of course, this classic seated to standing without hands. I hear it said often that this is the determinant of whether you are able to maintain independent living at some places, is like, can you come up to standing from the floor, and ideally without needing to use your hands at all. For folks who are new to yoga, balance can feel especially frustrating as your nervous system is starting to pick up all of the pieces and put them together to balance. So we want to keep things really light. Playful entries to poses can be really good. Standing in like a light version of tree pose, the kickstand, where the ball of your foot is on the floor, your heel is on your inner ankle, and passing a block back and forth with a partner is a great way to disrupt your visual system, to make this dynamic, to challenge the static balance, and to feel like, oh, it's not that I'm doing the easy version of tree pose, it's that I'm doing a pretty hard one. And I'm also giving my body a chance to entrain on this shape that tree pose is happening in the lower legs. Partner block pass is also a really nice way to do some partner work without touching each other. So you can get that connection happening within your classroom with no touch needed. Toe tap games. An example there would be to set your block in front of you and tap your toes onto, off of it, skip over. You could do a whole Simon Says thing, circle your toes around the block, put a block in front, put a block in back, all kinds of games that you could play there. And then progressions at the wall. Like I said, half moon we do first at the wall, so you really feel the lines of the shape, like you're on the Gravitron at the county fair and you're kind of glued against the wall. But then we start slowly to wean ourselves off of the wall. If you teach in a class with experienced students who are looking for another level, some ways to advance and progress your balance poses include that one eye, other eye, both eyes blinking, or closed eyes. Another thing you can do is turn your head. So that's a disruption to your vestibular system. You can also come up onto the unstable surfaces, as I've already covered. You can play with dynamic entries into the shape. And if you really want to go wild, you could give your students some kind of project like reciting the alphabet backward while holding a balance pose. As I said, there's always going to be a next level. Let me wax philosophical for a moment. Because as I said at the top of the hour, so much of yoga is about this balance and connection and relationship between what seems to be two opposing forces. These are the forces of effort and ease, of sthira and sukha. If you try too hard at a balance pose, if there's too much effort, it's not going to be sustainable. Your body tenses, it gets rigid. You don't have that fluidity that allows you to really adapt, to let those wobbles help you find center moment to moment. You're too rigid. At the other end, if you're not trying at all, if you're just kind of floppy, you're not going to be able to sustain the shape. So we're always looking for that sweet spot between sthira and sukha as we balance the body in space. We're looking also for balance within the body in those three planes of motion. The front to back is the frontal plane, left to right is movement in the sagittal plane, top to bottom is movement in the transverse plane. And going through a well-sequenced balance class is going to help us find that balance within the body that's so key to preventing overuse injuries, chronic injuries. Then we're looking for the balance in life, the one between effort and ease, the balance between work and rest, which is so critical for letting our bodies adapt to the time that they have spent in the growth zone. We come back to the comfort zone, we rest. Rest isn't just sleeping either. Rest is downtime. Rest is conscious recovery. Rest could be a breath practice. Rest could be a restorative yoga practice. We let our bodies adapt and process what happened. So balance isn't just about being able to hold yourself in space on one foot or two hands or one hand or a boat pose. It's really about finding steadiness within ourselves. And this is something that yoga philosophy is pointing at throughout the 8 limbs. We see this within the yamas. We're looking for a balance between asteya, not stealing, and aparigraha, not hoarding. So right there, we're looking for a balance. Similarly, in the niyamas, we are encouraged to find a balance between tapas, between dedication, zeal, fiery heat, and Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to God, surrender to the universe, surrender. So we're always looking for that sweet spot, that fulcrum. And of course, the minute you get it, something shifts and you have to continually correct. And that's what brings us really into the moment. That's why balance poses in the context of a yoga asana class are teaching us so much more than simply physical balance. They're a shortcut to being here now, to bringing our awareness into the present moment, and a mirror so that we can see our patterns, how we talk to ourselves in a balanced pose, where our edges of fear are, especially when we're thinking about maybe arm balances. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful teacher for us. Okay, I just talked at y'all for a good 45 minutes. I would love to know what questions you have, what's coming up for you around balance in your own teaching. If you have any questions, you can come to the Q&A space. So that is next to the chat bubble. It looks like a question mark. Feel free to type something there, or if you can't find that, you could type anything into the chat. I'm going to comb through the chat real quick and see what I might be able to say. Joanne, there's lots of great ways to include balance and chair yoga. It really depends on the ability of the students who are in the room on that day. Maybe you're standing by the chair, maybe you're working balance in the chair. And that can it could even be as simple as noticing the shift as you rock your weight side to side. In the chair, you could play with lifting a leg, you can play with arms, anything that is changing the lever length to destabilize and get the core to help you come back to center is going to qualify, in my mind, as balance work. Katie, I love that you teach your library yoga class, and I think this is wonderful. I mean, if you're doing it like among the stacks, those are at a great height. It's kind of like a bar in a ballet room. You can go to the lower, you can go to the higher. Even just changing the placement of your hand is going to be a way to modify the balance challenge for your students at the library? Oh, yeah, Julie, after knee surgery, yeah, balance is always going to be a little bit different. The trauma of having a knee replacement or a knee surgery is going to be a whole lot. Um, but there is balance on the other side of it too. Courtney, not having balance myself to demonstrate, I think your students will love you for that. They'll love you for your wobble. And you could say like, see if you can beat me at this. Like, do as I say, not as I do, because this is not my strength for balance. I think your students will really appreciate that. Jackie asks a great question. Do I recommend drishti at eye level or on the floor in front of the student? The answer to that is yes, I do. Either one. It totally depends on what is going to serve the students who are there. In general, looking low is going to make it feel a little bit easier to balance. Looking ahead is going to make it a little bit more difficult to balance. And looking up is going to make it far more difficult to balance. We can also think about how that placement, though, is going to affect the spine. So often if you tell students to look down, they're going to drop their chin and maybe round their back a little bit. And then that's changing the load in the kinetic chain. So that might make things harder or it might make things easier depending on the pose and the body. Neutral, generally good. Looking up, now I'm starting to come into some extension. I can feel my weight kicking back toward my heels just a little bit when I look up. So that is already going to make it a little bit harder for me to balance. And then I need to engage the front of my core just a little bit more to maintain mountain pose alignment. So any of those could work. It really just depends on what's going on for the student. You probably have said, and I know you've heard in yoga class, look at a non-moving object, don't look at me. But if folks want the balance challenge, you could have them try to track you as you move through the classroom. Often when I teach balance, I will drop down, I will model on what the shape might look like, just hold it long enough. And here's another way that you demonstrate without needing to have perfect balance. Just say, I'm just going to show you for breath. And then boop, you squat down. You come down to sit, or you walk over to the corner of the room to get out of their visual field, out of their line of sight. And that way their visual disruption is minimalized. But if you could also say, if you want more challenge today, I'll watch me as I move through the room. Or again, you turn your head side to side. Often your body is going to go where your gaze goes. So that's another way to talk about like gaze down, kind of rounding forward, gaze up, leaning backward. That's something that I know the power of drishti is really useful in my population of athletes, because if you're a cyclist, you want to look through the corner and you want to look to where you want to go. If you look at the broken glass in the bike lane, then of course your bike is going to go right over the broken glass. Runners know about looking to the next mailbox or the next mile marker or the next person that they plan on overcoming passing. Swimmers know about drishti, focus on the line at the bottom of the pool, and knowing when the T shows up, it's time to initiate their flip turn. And of course, players of ball sports like basketball, baseball, soccer use their drishti a whole lot. Keep the eyes on the prize, eyes on the ball. Katie, fantastic question. What is a good way to encourage people to use props? So you just tell everybody to do it. I love that you're getting some blocks. I would make just don't even say it's not an option. And you can find some ways to have the props work for evil as well as for good, which is to say, to let the props make it harder. Squeezing into a prop is not harder or easier, but if you were saying doing boat pose, you could have your students squeeze a prop in between their knees or their thighs, and that isn't easier, and they're going to feel more engagement, but it's not necessarily much harder either. You could use the props as the block as a prop to stand on, and then all of a sudden their relationship to the prop is going to change, because like, is the block my friend or my foe? It's fantastic. If it's normalized for the whole classroom to use them, if you're using them sometimes for evil and also for good, I think it's going to quickly become like, well, we just doing blocks this time. Michelle, this is a great question. Do I cue muscle activation versus hanging on a joint to stay up? That's a really great question because sometimes we think, oh, should I be telling folks like keep your joints soft, unlock your knees? But then again, like knees can go into that stronger extension that can feel like a lock. And in somebody, sometimes that's going to feel better. I don't really go one way or the other. I think less is more, not just in the effort, but even in the cueing, and let our students find ways to self-organize that make sense for them. Um, Ask them, like, how do you want this to feel? Do you want this to feel like it is an experience that you are having in your joints? Or do you want this to feel like it is a challenge to your muscles to do the work? And I think open-ended questions like that can be really helpful. I hope that is useful to you. Oh, good, Katie. I'm glad that was helpful. Any other questions? Feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm going to pull up the slides one last time and just show you a few more things that you will see in your, there we go, that you will see in your last slides here. I would love for you to think like, what is one thing from today you'll bring into your very next class? Maybe you're going to try the standing up from the block. Maybe you're going to try the squeezing the block or the standing on the block. Maybe you're going to try a sense of humor warm up of your own design in your next class. It's useful to write it down. There's something about the act of committing it to paper or even typing it in your class notes for your next class that will help you remember to do it. So I would love for you to commit to something. And if you feel like it, feel free to drop it into the chat. Love to see those. I'll point out a few more resources for you. One is the big one. It's Fundamentals of Teaching Balance. It's a 20 CEU course at Comfort Zone Yoga. I've put the link to the page describing it for you there. We go a lot deeper on all of the systems at play, on the psychology of balance, on the physiology of balance, on the philosophy of balance, and you'll earn 20 CEUs. It's totally self-paced. You can go through it in your own timeline. You will share a few lesson plans with me for my commentary, and you will get to see the lesson plans that everybody who's already come through the course have generated. So it's really great collaborative experience in there. You'll walk away with, like, you will never wonder what to teach for balance again in the rest of your career. That is my promise to you if you come through this course. I have a few other resources that I want you to know about. One is the book I referenced, the pictures in the slide deck came from The Art of Yoga Sequencing. There's a lot about balance in that book. Get it from your local library, buy it wherever books are sold. I'm just happy for you to read it. And as I alluded to earlier, I have a lesson planning membership called the Prep Station, Yoga Class Prep Station, that has an enormous movement library with a ton more resources. And as I think you've seen now, my approach to yoga is very much about balance, balance of the body and space, balance within the body, balance between effort and ease, work and rest. So there are a ton of balance oriented sequences and meditations for you to practice inside the Prep Station. What other questions can I answer for you? Feel free to ask in the chat. I think what usually happens is as soon as we hang up, you think of your question. So come through to the zone at comfortzoneyoga.com to the Q&A space, and you can put it there, and I will get right back to you on that. Next month's call is going to be restorative yoga that actually restores. I've noticed, and I know other teachers who've been around for a while, as have I, noticed, sometimes the restorative is being taught now almost like a propped yin, and the poses are held for a pretty short amount of time, maybe even 5 minutes, sometimes less. I think that a longer hold is key to the nervous system achieving that parasympathetic state, to really settling in. And so you're going to get to hear me give my disquisition on that and maybe do a prop demo on my mat again and talk y'all through how we can really be helping our students with restorative yoga. That is so great. Thank you, Mara. Thank you, Joanne. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for everybody who's been active in the chat. I deeply appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to join me live. This is always a highlight of my month. So I hope to see y'all on next time. And I will be sending this replay out to those who couldn't get here today on Saturday morning. Meanwhile, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time.